Hold that thought. I
Okay.
think we should talk about this challenge
We should
today.
talk about this challenge. Yes.
Today's exclusive.
So today's exclusive is once again me talking about skills, but talking about something very specific and relevant. And we already started to jump into it, which I think is when I think about skills, the big capital letter S skills, there's so many aspects to it that affect so many parts of organizations that it's hard to talk about skills very broadly because you start losing the meaning to the individual teams and departments and employees and all of the things. So today we're actually going to talk about a very specific problem that organizations are facing, which is technology is changing so rapidly and at such a pace, especially new technology is entering the scene, that people need to start to build these emerging skills to use the new technology. And a lot of our existing L&D systems are built around working with subject matter experts and getting content and building programs and launching that out to employees. And as Sarah and I were just talking about agentic AI, by the time L&D would go through that process of first, who is a subject matter expert in your organization on these things, and finding someone who can reasonably serve that purpose, but then going through the motions of how we've built content and delivered content before, things will be outdated. It's too late. There's a speed problem right now that is directly affecting skill development, but it's also straining the processes that L&D has built out over time to deliver learning experiences and content. And I'm going to soapbox for a second. I think the initial response to that was, we'll just have AI create a whole bunch of content. And we know that a lot of that is, one, maybe not totally accurate. Two, could be garbage completely, right?
Could.
Could be garbage, might likely be garbage completely. And so there's a challenge of how do you uphold the quality and trust and relevance of content in a time period when skills are emerging that need to be built rapidly and our existing systems can't really support how that's been done in the past. So that's the topic for today, which I'm excited to dig into. And in our little pre-show chat, as we're getting all the technology set up, we were talking about agentic AI. And my question was, I wonder how many folks actually even know what agentic AI is. And since Sarah was just at ATD, I would have loved to have done a survey of the folks at ATD. Not that I think that people don't necessarily know, but because I question how many people actually know, given that things are moving so rapidly.
Yeah, that's something that was really a tense moment. I was in Josh Cavalier's session on agentic AI, and as he was talking about the automation, he demonstrated how different tools could work together through this automation. And then he showed a diagrammed out agents working together to
Yeah,
do different processes. So it's if you can have an agent, let's just say as an example, design a storyboard and you feed it content, it creates a storyboard. Then once the storyboard's created, it feeds it to an image generator, feeds it to a video development tool, whatever. And so the whole process is happening without a person,
yeah,
theoretically, in agentic AI. And the room was so tense because in that diagram there were no people. And I talked to Josh after the session and I said, the thing that I think is really interesting about this is I almost feel like we're falling back in time to the days when you had a supervisor, and we still have this today. You have a
yeah,
supervisor who's training staff and you have another supervisor who's training their staff, and there's inconsistency across
yeah,
different teams for what messages people are getting, what skill sets they're getting based on, or what skill development or reinforcement they're getting based on who their supervisor is. In
yeah,
agentic AI, unless you have any visibility to what these agents are communicating to your teams and what
yeah,
feedback they're getting back, then it's almost like we've fallen back to have an inconsistent message again.
yeah, yeah.
And
I,
you
I
and you
think
have no insider data into that.
I think that's totally true. And I think we're seeing a lot of organizations that are tasking specific departments to figure out AI and what it means to them. And so I've got a framework that I use to think about AI adoption in organizations. And in my kind of mental model, there's four different ways that people can leverage AI. There's personal productivity and how I can use AI to do my job better. There's new AI driven systems. So that's a lot of the agentic AI stuff. And then because I'm in a product world, typically, there's AI to build products and starting to like specifically build the product that you offer to your customers. And then there are AI features that your customers can use in your product, which is they're both product related, but it's slightly different in terms of like behind the scenes AI versus customer facing AI.
And then there's AI marketing and AI communications.
Sure,
And then it's just like, where did
sure.
all the people go?
Yeah.
That's what I keep
Well, and
thinking. And that's why it feels so tense.
I don't think organizations, if I just think of those four buckets, do people understand where they are along a learning curve in each of those areas and where your organization is? Because certainly, and you probably saw this at ATD, some companies jumped immediately to the AI features for their customers without having any of the other stuff figured out, which we could argue might or might not be a good idea to start with customer facing features.
I don't know how much of an argument it is, but that remains to be seen.
But I think that there's a level of maturity that organizations have to go through, and they need to go through it rapidly to understand how they're using, and we're picking on AI as the only emerging technology, but I think it's relevant given the discussions at ATD this week and everything that we're seeing. This is true of any new technology. Looking at the potential impacts for the business and then saying, how are we thinking about this and what skills do people need to actually be able to leverage this new technology in a way that helps them, helps their team, helps their company. And one of the challenges, again, this was a pre-conversation, is that because L&D has had a process of developing content and developing experiences and working through all those subject matter expert, all the things, the speed at which things are happening is too slow to meet the needs of the business. The unevenly distributed information or different teams, as you said, Sarah, like every team approaching this in different ways or different information being shared creates discrepancies and disconnects within teams and organizations. And it's very hard for new skills and emerging skills to figure out how to create pretty quickly and in relevant ways content and experiences that help people start learning quickly. And in those cases, usually it's learning on the job because we're asking people to do this within the flow of work. We're asking them to try this new tool. We're asking them to do this new process. And they're usually doing it as they're trying to do a task or something related to their job. But they don't necessarily have, it's like me trying to learn any new technology. I'm like, it's going to take me 10 times as long to do this the first time because I've never used this tool before. I've never used this tech before. With AI, it's tricky because AI is so fast. So it doesn't matter if it takes me a long time to figure out how to use Canva to build a website for the first time versus Wix to build a website for the first time because those technologies are waiting for me to drive them. AI, especially agentic AI, can drive itself once you give it a little bit of direction. And I don't think that we've been in a place as a society, as a world, where that's been true before. That tools can actually drive the work themselves once we set them up. So, well, I'm thinking about my history living in Michigan. Maybe the car manufacturing lines once they were set up, but they still needed human supervision. So if I use that analogy of like, how do people know what things are supposed to work like? How can we oversee it? And how do we train people on how to work with these tools in a more consistent way? What are those skills that folks need to build?
Do you think that there is a risk of the technology getting ahead of itself because it can work so fast? But if it's
Yeah.
working on a broken premise or it's working on bad data or it's missing data pieces, but it's just running with it, is that where things start to break down? Because it is so fast. We make mistakes when we go too
Yeah.
fast as humans. And so I've been trying to think about this with my own human brain reasoning. Is this something that somebody just takes something and runs with it? AI is doing that at lightning speed. What if it's doing that on
So
a broken premise?
Lori Niles Hoffman posted a post on LinkedIn earlier this week, so shout out Lori, about instead of just thinking about training people, do we also need to start thinking about how we're training AI in an ongoing way with new information and having feedback loops and making sure, because I think you're absolutely right, Sarah. What AI will do because of its speed is if it has wrong information and it just runs with it, it'll amplify the wrongness over time.
Right.
Like it'll just get more wrong.
So the thing that I keep going back to is at that speed, and if you have agentic AI where things or processes are working
Yeah.
together, you have no visibility into that anymore. How do you even know that things
Yep.
have gone off the rails? I was talking to Tracy Cantu this past week at the conference, and she said, I think that we're going to see the role of the documentation person, like the training
Yeah.
documentation person or the instructional writer come back because you have to be able to know how to parse out that content in a way that it is structured for AI to use it. And I thought,
Yep.
so like along those same lines as what Lori had said, how do we operate in this new environment?
So if I think about the human side of this, like just in this brief conversation talking about the challenges, we're already amplifying the human oversight is important, and those humans need to know how to interact with the technology and understand what the technology is doing, right? Like we need to understand how these systems are working so we actually can monitor and fact check it, like correctness check it. And we need to figure out the role of humans in this ecosystem where technology can start to do a lot of the things, like do a lot of the handoffs, do a lot of the integrations. I've been working with platform integrations now for a very long time, Rob, I'm sure. I'm like figuring out how to get systems to talk to each other, and now AI is just talking to each other. So we had built out standards and systems and all of these things to try to facilitate that. And when I think about XAPI, which is, I think, a great example of a standard that was built to allow systems to talk to each other at greater depth and with greater specificity of data than any other system that we had before, to create a common language of talking to each other. Think about how hard it's been for organizations and individuals to adopt that and
Mhm.
integrate with it. It's been over a decade now that we've been trying to get these systems in place, and suddenly AI is just doing it, but it's got no guardrails, really. And so we have to figure out how to build those guardrails. And so when I think about, so now I'm going to pick on XAPI a little bit. XAPI actually is part of the solution to this problem for L&D folks, but they need to understand how the AI works and they need to understand how the data pieces work that feed into the AI to make these systems work so that they can intelligently oversee the work that the AI is doing. There's some prerequisites to be able to oversee these systems and understanding how do they connect, how do they talk to each other, what information are they pulling in and pulling from, and how can I validate that with data that I trust.
I saw this post, and maybe it was a couple of days ago that Danny Johnson had posted at Red Thread, had posted about some of the things that we need to know now. To your
Yeah.
point,
Yep.
talking about data and talking about AI and talking about like the more of the technical aspects of this stuff that really
Yep.
as a field, we should have been learning all along in our roles. And I say as a field, that's actually not fair because I don't think an instructional designer, if you are specializing in how people learn
Yeah.
and facilitating that process, are you a data analyst? No, but you need to know what questions to ask.
Yep.
And so it's like figuring out, I'm curious about the shakedown of these roles and the skills that we're expected to have in different roles now and how that's emerging too.
I think thinking about L&D in comparison to a data analyst is a really good thought process. Like I think I hate the phrase thought experiment, but in this case I think it's relevant because I do think our role is shifting. If we can create systems that emulate the best of learning theory to create content that is formatted and structured in a way that we know can facilitate the human learning piece, we now also need to figure that out for machine learning. And how do we train and help our systems be smart and accurate and all of those pieces? And that is a lot what psychometricians have done and data scientists have done and data analysts and looking at the data have done. And we have not really, we focused on the people, right? Not on the data. We focused on the human learning side. Now we're at this intersection of human and machine learning intersection, and we've got to think differently and holistically about the systems that are getting work done and how we play a role in making sure that they know what they're doing. They're doing those things accurately, that they've got the right data and the right content to empower them to do the right things. And I'm saying them, humans and machines simultaneously, but there will be so much overlap in how work gets done that I think it's dangerous for us to only think of ourselves as serving the needs of the humans of the business and not also considering the artificial intelligence side of the business. Which
Right.
is all
And
just
that's
to say we have a lot to learn.
Yeah. That's what I like about how you talked about your model earlier
Yeah,
about each role in that process,
yeah,
which is what Josh and I talked about after the session is these diagrams need to show more than here's
yeah,
robots talking to each
yeah,
other. There's
absolutely.
way more to it than that.
Yep,
I mentioned to Josh, like, where are the human injection points into this and how are we facilitating this process and
yeah.
playing a role in it? Now, I know we only have a short period of time to talk about this today. I always go down the rabbit hole of do we even know how AI works enough to do
Yep,
this? And so
yeah.
that is a discussion perhaps for another time, unless you feel like you have a minute to address
So,
it.
so if we know that, I think we're like digging in on the problem and talking about it realistically, which is there is not a world moving forward where it's only humans that are doing work. And
Well,
so
and
if
it
we,
hasn't been actually. I
it
mean, this
hasn't
isn't
been.
new either. It's just accelerated at this
It's
point.
accelerating and the technology is doing more things independently than it used to do before. Yeah. So if that's the case, and this is happening very quickly, how do we prepare ourselves, each other, our teams, our organizations for this transition? Because it's going to affect everybody. I can't think of a job, maybe there's some out there that won't be affected by technology, but over time, I think all jobs will be affected by technology in some way. And how do we, in this time period, right now where it's like rapidly changing and things are being experimented with and blowing up, how do we stay in it? And I'm going to go back to the fact that I'm Gen X and Gen Xers have already been through this before. So I feel like uniquely, like we were there before the internet. So we went through this whole like, oh my gosh, the internet information availability and is available to us in ways that was never available before. How is that going to change how we communicate and how we all the things, right? But the reality is the way that we learned back then. I was just talking to some folks this week that were like, remember when we were using these search engines and tools and like we were looking up Dogpile as a search engine, which if you know what Dogpile is, you're my people. But there were all of these tech and we were just socially sharing. Like we were like, hey, I found the search engine or I'm using this tool. And it was the viral before there was the internet viral, right? Like we were talking about things and sharing tools and disseminating information quickly in the best ways we had at the time. So now we've got these big L&D departments that have tech and access to platforms and all the things that are not necessarily serving the needs of what they need to do today. How do we help people in the flow of work get access to the content that they need? How do we identify whether that content is helpful? How do we enable some of that social sharing, but with a little bit of oversight? Because as you mentioned before, Sarah, people are doing this on their own right now. We just don't necessarily know what they're doing, and we don't know what content they're using, and we don't necessarily know what they have access to or what they're finding that's helpful. Like all of that is hidden right now, and it's the whisper down the lane way of like departments and teams figuring stuff out. To centralize that, to help L&D say, hey, we want to facilitate this in a more constructive way, I think we need new tools. I think we need new ways of thinking about this. I think we need to really lean in to the flow of work capabilities of, hey, have you seen this new AI agent that's available in Microsoft Teams or that's available, right? Like people aren't even aware necessarily of the things that are available to them, and we need to catch them in the moment of need rather than create these big, robust programs that take a long time to build and then take even longer to work through.
Like the days of going to training are dwindling, and not that would disappear completely. There are
Sure.
times where you need to have structured learning environments for new things and new training and things like that. I get leadership training and onboarding and stuff like that. There's a need for that. But a lot of what we do in workforce development, especially, is performance support and ongoing, like
Yep.
reinforcement, making sure that people have the information they need when things change in the organization, to your point, and locking all of that into a learning platform and trying to build all these capabilities into that box makes zero sense. Like, I'm not saying that LMSs don't play a role or LXPs don't play a role, and maybe they do in the organization, but talk to us a little bit about what is that environment? What do you think that ecosystem looks like?
Yeah, and Sarah knows I'm working on a white paper talking about this, which has been super challenging, to be honest, because it's forcing me to think about and change the mindset that we've had now for decades that you go to a platform or a place to learn. And we've talked for a long time about being able to access content in the flow of work, being able to share content, distribute content, and share it at scale. And almost all the answers up to this point has been a platform. And even the evolution from LMS to LXP, where it was like, we're just going to aggregate all this content, but we're going to have it accessible through a place where you still have to go to get access to that content, is no longer relevant because we do have AI agents that talk to each other and they aren't stuck in a particular platform necessarily. They can talk across systems. And we now need to really think about how people are working and how we get information to them at the time of need. So the performance support and performance enablement, we talked to JD last week. Oh my gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago. Last week about performance enablement. All of that is an indicator of this new ecosystem is really our workforce systems that are interconnected very likely through AI integrations. And L&D needs to think about how we insert ourselves into those systems at the time of need and communicate to folks when they need us, where they need us, how they need us to, which is very different than saying, go to this place to learn.
Yes, we need to get divorced from the learning platform partner. We have to reposition what we do in our field to be about supporting our workforce or supporting our learners, our target audience, our customers, whoever it is that you are training, supporting. We have to reposition ourselves instead of those are the LMS people, those are the
I,
compliance people. Like, we have to get
yep.
out of that, or we're not going to have a role in this new ecosystem. And Brian made a really good point in the chat. AI can't scrape these platforms. If you're
No.
doing all this stuff with AI, all the AI, the cute AI stuff that people are putting in their LMSs right now is irrelevant. And it can't even keep up because it's not even that powerful. And I could be wrong, and I can't tell the future, but I don't see a role anymore for it.
So I've been thinking about this very much like a library model that in libraries and bookstores, there is a need for us to have some curators of content that can be accessible and distributed. But the reality is that information only is relevant when it's out in somebody's hands, out in the field, in their house, at the coffee shop. Like they're only really getting access to that information or finding it relevant when they want it, where they want it. They don't want to have to go and read at the library.
I want to go read at the library,
I do
Karen.
like to read at the library. I
Please don't
and
get rid of my library.
no, but in the system, we actually need the library.
Right.
Like, that is the place where you can go and get access to this stuff, but you don't have to go there necessarily. You can also go to a bookstore, or you can go to your friend's house who has the book. I'm using such an archaic paper-based model analogy for this. But books, I love books. Okay. So I have a million books myself. I will lend books. I will take other people's books. They've got little libraries down the street from me where people are like, hey, I want to share books. The content is accessible in all kinds of different places. You don't just have to go to a library to access a book.
But the thing is, though, is that the only place where, and I'm going to poke a hole in what you just said,
I love
in
it.
the organization, if we're saying that the LMS is the library,
Sure.
is this the library that you want to go to? Is this your
No,
happy place library?
no,
Or
it's
is
not.
there somewhere else in your organization that is your
Yeah,
library? That is, this is the
yeah.
place where the stuff is. This is the place that I go to when I want the real answers. And
I
so, just to challenge that model, what does that actually look like in your
so
company?
I think that's very true that the platforms and the technologies that we have today very likely do not serve us in the future. And as we start thinking about this model of flow of work, getting out information quickly, getting it in the hands of people where they need it, when they need it, creating different distribution systems to get access to that content and information and training and learning experiences and all the things that we can't assume that the technology that we have today that served a different purpose will serve that purpose in the future. We can't assume that the LMS as it has existed for compliance tracking is going to serve the needs of distributed learning content in the flow of work. To
Maybe just a
assume,
compliance store.
yeah,
So one of the things I wanted us to wrap
the
on
compliance
kind of
store.
no, but I want to wrap this on XCL's role in this because one of the
Yeah,
things that Karina and I've been talking, and Rob as well, have been talking a lot about is the LMS now your compliance record that sits
yeah,
off in the corner somewhere and you never have to ever look at it or go to it, but it plays the function of recording completions of certain required trainings or things that you have to do in your organization. And then you have an environment where a tool like XCL, when there is no tool like XCL, but where XCL is helping you distribute the content, track the content, and then based on the data,
yeah.
triggers that record to be recorded in the LMS. So
Yeah.
you have your record, but the people never have to go to it. You meet the business need. So it plays a role, but it's not a place to go for training or information,
It's no longer the central location. It is a node in the ecosystem
which is
that
what it was
serves
originally intended to be
a
anyway.
100%. It's gonna,
So,
we're just gonna go back to the original intent of the LMS, which is to track the compliance content. Not that you couldn't do that in different ways, but if you really want a center place for compliance, legal record holding stuff, sure, you could create that. But then your whole ecosystem is now distributed and relevant and point of need. And so I think, Sarah, given that we have already run out of time and there's a whole conversation that we started and we need to continue about the analyst like data role, the second part of this conversation is how do we queue up the data so that we can be a lot smarter about how that new ecosystem is working? And how do we shift our role from managing a place where people have to go to learn to understanding the data that we're collecting from all of the experiences across the ecosystem and making better and smarter investments to improve those experiences? I think
right.
that's a real shift that we could schedule for a future exclusive.
And is a skill within itself. So
It
I
is.
think that is an excellent idea. Thank you, Kareen, for sharing today. I think that we could just schedule exclusives all the time on skills and on data and just talk about this forever. So thank you for sharing. And thank you for those who joined the chat, Brian, Jacob. Okay, we'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.